All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well today. This is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show. And on this show, we do a quick recap of yesterday's slate, what went well, what might not have gone as well. And then we'll look at today's slate. And then, we talk through the plays that we like, some guys that we might want to go lower on, potential leverage plays. And then on the pre-lock show at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we talked through the implementation of what we will actually be doing on this slate. Things like leverage plays, capping exposure, what we're actually planning to do. And then we go from there. The one thing I will mention is that last night was an interesting slate. I had a really pretty good night. Not a great night, but close. But there are definitely some things that could have gone better. I think what is the most important thing here is that we need to make sure that you're late swapping. Last night was a late swap kind of night. The John Morant news came out after lock. And then, of course, the winning lineup had 4 Grizzlies in it. So that's the way that goes. But let's look at the winning lineup. This was the $100,000 winning lineup. We have Jalen Brunson in it. I don't think that's a major surprise. He wasn't someone that I was very high on, but I understood the play. Josh Richardson wasn't a core play, but we had a good bit of exposure to him on the pre-lock show. That didn't change for me. Zach LaVine, I wasn't super high on. I think I had him in one line, maybe. Jaren Jackson Jr. was a core play. He was fine. Steven Adams made a ton of sense once we found out John Morant was out. I'm surprised he was only 3.9%, but again, a lot of people don't like to late swap. Tyus Jones made so much sense when John Morant was out. They were facing the Spurs, the worst defense in the league. You could have played all these guys, and I did. In late swap, I boosted up Dylan Brooks. Tyus Jones became a core play. Jaren Jackson Jr. was already a core play. Steven Adams, I boosted a little bit. Fun fact about late swap is that it doesn't like it as much when I play with the min exposures and the max exposures, but when I mess with the projections themselves, it works a little bit smoother. So a little bit of a different philosophy for me on late swap, but same thing. And then Jamal Murray was a little bit of a sneaky play coming in there at the end. I had more Jokic exposure, but Jamal Murray's typically the way I should have gone. And I usually am I'm usually pretty high on Jamal Murray, so I'm kind of disappointed in myself for not figuring that one out, but it happens. So I had a pretty good night. Let's see what everyone's saying. Good to see you guys, everyone who's here. Appreciate y'all's support. I know it's hard to join the show live sometimes. Grayson Kale said, "What's up, Joe? Thinking about going over to DraftKings. What contest do you play?" Grayson, my contest selection shifts a ton depending on what's going on in my personal life. But I've played pretty much every tournament you can that you can 150 max. I started off playing the $4.20 max and took that down, and that's when I started playing heavier. Typically, and more so probably next month, you'll see me a lot in like the 3 max high dollar entry. I'll start playing 20 maxes a little bit more. But currently, I jump around between the different $150 options. I haven't been taking my shot at the 100K. Probably will start doing that again in March. So yeah, a little bit everywhere. Kanger, good to see you, man. Said the Heat strike again. Yeah, this slate is wild, guys. This slate is wild with news. We have a decent amount of it. There are some questionable tags that we're gonna have to keep an eye on, but the Heat hit us pretty hard today. We're gonna be playing a lot of crappy no names that we don't love playing. Oscar Robinson's already standing out a good bit. Michael, good to see you. Good morning. Yeah, excited for a new day. Should be a fun one. Steve Lynn, always good to see you, man. Appreciate you being able to check in. Bobby said, always glad when I can join live. Yeah, I love it when you can join live, Bobby. You're a freaking goat. This last year, I feel like you've been like really active in like the chat and YouTube channel. You've even had some really good calls and plays yourself. So love seeing you in here. And Russell Westbrook he came through. It took him a little while, but he was able to at least break in. Tripled your money. Yeah, I did too. Exactly 3x. Awesome. Nice. And yeah, Jamal crushed yesterday. Steve Lynn said, you were all over Jalen Brunson last night. Nice. But had a change of heart when I realized that he wasn't in a great spot. Yeah. See, for me, like if I have like a gut call on someone, I'll add a little bit of exposure still, even if it's not a great play. In particular, if someone's supposed to be low owned, I'll feel better about it. the important thing for me is that you don't have like 5 to 10 gut calls. Usually just try to limit it to 1 or 2 a slate. And that philosophy works for me. And it just keeps it fun. Like if you just ignore all of your gut calls, then you're just listening to other people. And personally, I'm not a big fan of just following the leader. Dave, I always appreciate you, man. Yeah, hit the like button. Appreciate the support. We hit 10,000 subscribers yesterday, so I know Geek was really happy about that. Always good to see you, Dave. Grayson, good to see you. Bobby said Jimmy B and SGA. Yep, you're not wrong. And all right, one more before we kind of start getting into these games. Bobby said, I almost always profit nothing crazy in the $1.20 max, but almost always end up losing in the $4.20 max. I use the same 20 lineups. Any advice? Huh. So personally, I don't believe I've played the $1.20 max. So I'm going to look at it on DraftKings and just kind of see what the differences are. Is probably, if I had to guess, it's probably because in the $1.20 max, you're facing less people. And in the $4.20 max, you're facing more. And so we would just need to talk about kind of like how chalky your plays are, if you're having enough leverage exposure, things of that sort, to make sure you're getting different enough to make sure you can still have those high ceiling kind of plays. For me, that's why I typically advise when people are kind of struggling to cash at a higher price range. Thomas Dye, always good to see you. And Wayne. All right, let's get to it, guys. This slate is a short one, 7-game slate. We have a nice balanced week ahead of us, which is rare, but I appreciate a lot. Starting off with the Pistons, we have Bogdanovich out. We have Jalen Duren out. Isaiah Livers is questionable. Rodney McGruder appears to be healthy. Marvin Bagley is still out, and Cade Cunningham is out. The big news here is Bogdanovich being out. He is a high usage player. He's a streaky shooter. So when his shot falls, he's great. When it's not, he's pretty mediocre. But what that means is that we see a nice increase in usage to guys like Jaden Ivey, Burks, Bay, with Bogdanovich and Cunningham off the floor. Even some of the forwards are in slightly better spots. They should see more minutes. Guys like Diallo, maybe even Kevin Knox. It depends on how much more value we get on this slate before I can actually make like a formal final call on it. But as of right now, I'm not really planning on taking these shots, but I do think they're at least viable and way more viable than they could have been. Vic, good to see you, man. JJ as well. Awesome. And so outside of that, of course, like we can still have exposure to your guys. Like, I think my main guys here are probably going to be like your Killian Hayes, just because plus spot. Jaden Ivey stands out with Bogdanovich being out. And then on the other side of the game, we have the 76ers. Again, guys, this spread is very wide. So it looks like the 76ers are supposed to blow out the Pistons. I don't try to chase blowouts, but I'm interested in seeing where the ownership's going to lie on these guys. Joel Embiid is questionable, so that does matter a lot. From the standpoint of like Paul Reed and Harrell have actually started performing slightly better with Embiid out. The matchup is solid against the Pistons, so not something I'm afraid of. I need to dig deeper into the game on Sunday to understand those rotations if we find out Joel Embiid is not going to play. He wasn't shoot around, if I saw that news correctly, so there's a chance that he does play, and if that's the case, I'm a lot less interested in this team. If the blowout is just insane, if the ownership is insanely low on James Harden and Maxey, I'll take some shots. Perhaps even Embiid, but that 11,200 price tag on a questionable guy scares me a little bit. But I don't know. This is an interesting spot, but nothing standing out too much this early, especially when we get to some of the other games where we have so many guys out. It's hard to attack a team that looks like they might be relatively healthy. Vic David said, need help on a DK single entry lineup. What's chalk and what's true value? Must lock plays. Yeah, we can definitely talk about it more so on the pre-lock show, because we can decide like what's chalk when we get closer to lock. And then we can talk through like what's the good value on the slate and what's value I don't trust. Something we don't talk about all the time, but if it was asked, we can definitely talk about it on the pre-lock show in a bit more detail. Kanger said, think Tucker is back. So yeah, that's true. That's a good point. If Tucker comes back, moving back, could hurt Reed a good bit as well. If Embiid plays, Tucker will probably move back to the power forward spot. Doesn't really matter for me too much. 3,200 Tucker's, he doesn't do anything. I shouldn't be tempted. Yeah, but in general, guys, this team it's just not a team I'm super interested in. Yeah, agreed, Vic. That entire game is just ugly. I think the Pistons we can take shots on with Bogdanovich out, especially if people overlook it. But in general, like the blowout risk, I think the only reason why I'm thinking I want some exposure to it is because I think everyone's going to fade it. But I think it's fine too, if that makes sense. Deshaun said, yes, thank you. I need it. Awesome. All right. Good. All right. Moving on to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Of course, Poku's out. Yang, Jeremiah Robinson, Earl. Nothing crazy here. Everyone's looking relatively healthy. The Thunder, in general, typically wouldn't be a team that we're excited to play against. But we want exposure to this game because the Miami Heat have a ton of guys out, which means that the matchup is softer than it appears to be on paper. So for me, when it comes to the Oklahoma City Thunder, we see like a nice matchup for guys like SGA. I think SGA is really where I want to go here. You can take shots on Man and Dort if you want to. Even Giddey's viable here. I think Giddey's someone I'll have some exposure to naturally. But SGA is the guy that if on my first run, I don't have enough exposure to him, I will force exposure to him. So he's the only guy that I plan on making actual changes to the domination station for. The rest of these guys, I just hope I get exposure or some exposure to them naturally. Lou Dort being like the main guy, Giddey's also viable for me too. Now, guys, Jimmy Hayes said, does this show start at 9 a.m.? I'm late again, LOL. This show starts at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So whatever time that is for you, that is when this show will start. Sometimes I'm late, but very, very rarely. All right. Next up, we have the Miami Heat, guys. This list is so freaking long. We have Bam Adebayo is out. That is huge. Tyler Hero is out. That is also big news. Kyle Lowry is out. That's 3 studs, 3 starters. Bam, Hero, Lowry. Huge. Caleb Martin's out. Gabe Vincent's probable. Dwayne Dedmon's probable. Haslam's questionable. Duncan Robinson's been out. Jovic is out. Yurtsven is out. There's some news out there that Dwayne Dedmon might not see a ton of run from a minute standpoint in this game, so that kind of takes me off him a good bit. And then Orlando Robinson's really the main piece here with Bam Adebayo out, that he's going to be so hard to avoid on this slate. I have to assume he's going to be the most popular guy for good reason. I can't think of a reason for why he's not close to a lock. I don't lock guys, but I am actively trying to find a reason to not do that. So hopefully I find one because I really am not a fan of doing that. And if we get the news that Dedmon is actually going to be on a pretty strict minutes limit, then other power forwards and centers who are gross could be more viable on this slate as well, or in this game as well. For me, I'm most excited about Jimmy Butler here at 8,900 with absolutely no other stars on this team. As long as he doesn't randomly end up not playing too, I am totally fine having plenty of exposure to Jimmy Butler tonight. My only concern is I think that's going to be a pretty popular approach, but it makes too much sense. I'm also totally fine with Hero out and Martin out. I'm always more open to taking shots on guys like Max Strus at 4,500. Nice spot for him. Gabe Vincent. He's probable, so as long as he plays, should be in a good spot as well. Victor Oladipo might be a little sneaky on this slate, so I do want to keep an eye out for his ownership before I kind of make a conclusion on if he's going to be a leverage play for me or not. But if I had to guess, he'll probably be relatively popular on this slate as well. So yeah, guys, the Miami Heat are a team that I want to have a lot of exposure to. I love the spot. It's also funny, too, that like the Miami Heat are missing a ton of guys, but the spread is still only 2 points, 2.5 points. It's freaking hilarious, at least to me. The little things in life. Vic David said Highsmith looks good, but no great points wise, but minutes upside in favor. Yeah, I agree. Like, the minutes upside is there for him, but like fantasy points per minute isn't super high for a guy like Highsmith. But I think he's viable on this slate as well. I would love to get a little bit more clarification on how much they're planning on using Deadman tonight. Uh, I don't think we'll actually get anything official, so I'm totally fine taking shots on Highsmith, especially if he's underowned. Gumby, yeah, agreed, man. Agreed. All right, guys, moving on to the Charlotte Hornets. Gordon Hayward is doubtful. Kelly Oubre's been out for a while, so nothing too crazy there. For the Hornets, I'm not super excited about the matchup. I think Jalen McDaniels probably starts again here, so solid for him. But Jalen McDaniels is a pretty low usage guy, pretty low fantasy points per minute guy. He's a 16.2% usage rate. Not really the kind of guy that I love to target at 5,300, but the minutes are there for him, so that's why he's still viable on this slate. I don't love the matchup against the Raptors. I think that's why no one's really standing out for me a ton here. So yeah, that I just there's not a play I'm excited about on the Hornets, at least as of right now, without any ownership information. Not a big fan of it. For the Raptors, they only have one injury, and is Otto Porter Jr. I mean, I think you guys know. For me, at this point, I just play the bigs against the Hornets, and I go from there. So that's Pascal Siakam on this slate. Pascal Siakam's been in fantastic form, so I'll have exposure to him. I don't know where his ownership's going to be at, so I don't know how far over the field I'll be, but I'll be over the field. That's just the way I've been playing, and I'm going to keep doing that. I think Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., they're viable, but I think there's just more interesting spots with the value we have on this slate, and I think there's studs that I prefer. I'll be okay with if I ran the domination station and gave me like 10-15% of like a Gary Trent Jr. or a Fred VanVleet, but my point is I'm not planning on them being like a core piece for me on this slate. Sorry, Bobby. FVV is Fred VanVleet. Sorry. I'm also really bad with acronyms, and so when I know one, I'm like, oh yeah, I got this. I have this acronym down. I'm just gonna say it all the time, and then someone will put an acronym in the chat or like a nickname, and I'm like, who is that? Like, I don't know who that is. It gets embarrassing sometimes for me. Next up, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. Again, relatively healthy team facing off against the Jazz. Dean Wade's out, Windler's out, Ricky Rubio's out. Nothing too crazy here. The one thing that is fun is that this is a narrative game for Donovan Mitchell against the Utah Jazz. He used to play for the Jazz. Revenge. This is not the first time that they've matched up. They played last month, I believe, and Donovan Mitchell played pretty well in that spot. This is, I believe, his first time playing in Utah, though, so against the Jazz. So interesting narrative. The spot itself doesn't really pop too much for me, but if Donovan Mitchell ends up being low owned like he was the last time they played, I'm willing to take a shot on the narrative here. The guys who are in good spots, though, we've been playing bigs against the Utah Jazz a good bit this season. So Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are definitely viable here. Again, a lot of what I do on this slate will be determined around ownership. And so if they're high owned, I would probably just try to match the field on them. If they're low owned, these guys will be leverage plays for me. It just depends on where they land. And then Garland, he's fine. If he shows up in my lines, he shows up. But if he doesn't, it is what it is. Jamie said, slates like these are tough because you have good teams like the Heat and Clippers, but half of their team is out. And how much can you rely on Butler and Leonard alone? Yeah, I mean, slates like these can be tough. I agree. And I'm always a little uneasy during slates like these. But I've had some of my better nights just being uncomfortable. Like being willing, like there's a low owned guy who's in a plus spot because he's seeing more minutes. We don't really know what his usage rate looks like because he hasn't been on the court a ton. If a guy like that's low owned, I'm more willing to take a shot on that. If Leonard is alone and people are afraid of the blowout, I'm willing. and he's low owned because of that, I'm going to take a shot on that. And so just being more open to taking shots on lower owned guys is pretty much how I treat slates like this, just because a lot goes overlooked or people become too afraid to take those shots. So, for instance, with the Miami Heat, we know a lot of these guys are going to be out, but I don't think this is going to happen. But this could happen for the Clippers or another team. Sometimes people are like, oh, this looks like a really good spot for Orlando Robinson, but he's so cheap, and there's other centers I like more so on the slate. I don't really know what this game is going to look like, so I'm going to try and avoid it. Those are spots that we can attack if we see the ownership is low, but he's in the plus spot, and people are just afraid to attack a guy that they don't know his name. Orlando Robinson isn't the right example, but replace him with another no-name guy on this slate, and that's typically how you can kind of get some not easy takedowns, but easier low-owned plays, in my opinion. A lot of it just revolves around ownership. Bobby said Mitchell only played like 20 minutes in that first matchup. Yeah, I think I remember like him like crushing for like the first 10 to 20 minutes, but then they were blowing out the team so bad that they didn't need him anymore. So he played great, but they just didn't need him. Jimmy Hayes said, do you use the sim model to get the sleepers? Yeah, the sim models are definitely a big, massive tool that I utilize a lot when it comes to the NBA. Sim model is not updated right now, so it just kind of depends on whenever it's ready. Slate doesn't lock until 7. As long as the sim model's up and running by like 4 or 5-ish, I'm fine with it. Thomas Dye said, last game it was a blowout, so Mitchell did not hit value. Yeah. He did not. Bobby said, yeah, you're right. He scored 28.5 points in those 22 minutes. Yeah. It's interesting. If this game can stay close, I'm willing to take the shot again, especially if he's low owned, but we'll see. I always feel so bad just telling everyone it just depends on the ownership because it sounds so boring, but it's true. It's the truthful fact of the matter for me, at least. Like we know Jimmy Butler and Kawhi are in good spots, but for me, it just depends on how popular they'll be. Another interesting spot tonight are the Utah Jazz. Kelly Olynyk is out. Taylor Horton Tucker is out. Doesn't really matter. Simone Fontecchio is not on the injury report. And then Colin Sexton has been out for a little bit here. When Kelly O is out, I am willing to play Walker Kessler. Having a solid rookie season, pulling for him to do well. The matchup is not great. So that's a thing. The matchup against the Cleveland Cavaliers is one of the toughest matchups you can have in the NBA. And so I'm less willing to take shots on guys like Clarkson and Markkanen here just because they're priced up. But with that being said, Clarkson and Beasley do see an increase in usage with Kelly Olynyk being out. So conflicting information a little bit, but it's something that I do want to dig a little bit deeper into. Kessler will more than likely be a leverage play for me tonight, especially if he's low owned. I just like the spot and price tag for him. I think he can get past the tough defense with a safer minutes floor. So he's a guy that I like on this slate. I think Beasley's another guy I'll be willing to take a shot on with Kelly O out and Sexton still out. But outside of that, it's going to be hard for me to pull the trigger on a guy like Lauri Markkanen. I think he'll probably be low owned, but it's still going to be hard for me to attack him at 9,700 against one of the best defenses in the league. And then Mike Conley always gets overlooked. If it was a softer matchup, I'd be more willing to attack it, but not a fan on this slate. Jimmy said, got it. Nice. Jimmy said, yeah, hit that like button. I agree, man. Don't forget. Definitely helps out, people to see the videos more and help the channel grow and support us. And always helpful when that happens. Mr. Torrin said, DFS is so hard for me to get. I struggle between stacking games versus bits and pieces from everywhere. I always seem to get it wrong. Yeah, when I first started too, I was driving myself mad. I was tilting like the people trying to give advice. And I was just like, man, screw you guys. And that's when I started to kind of, that's when I joined DFS Army. I started to see like the processes that they were using and I just kind of made them my own. And that worked for me. I mean, I think I'm not a big game stacker. I never try to force games. I primarily focus on trying to find leverage plays, which is when I'm going to be at least double the field on a guy. I usually try to make sure they're low owned, but sometimes they're like 15 to 20% owned, and I'm still going to double that. So like hitting 40% on them. So that's how I play. I always walk through what I do on the pre-lock show. Of course, sometimes there's slates like yesterday where you needed to utilize the late slot, the late swap feature to really win. But I'm always open to at least show you guys what I do. I never say it's the best way, but it's worked a lot for me over the years. Bobby said, I'm hoping Utah keeps it close so Mitchell can play longer. I do too. First, I'm hoping Mitchell's low owned. And then second, I'm hoping Utah keeps it close. And then I'll be having a good night. But if Mitchell's popular, I don't think he will be. But if he is, then I probably won't try to force it. Grayson said, Mark, yeah, you're right. You are right. Marketing revenge narrative. Remember I said this last time I came with this Mark Williams smash? Okay, Grayson. All right, Grayson. You're on a little bit of a heater. And I forgot about marketing. Marketing was so irrelevant on the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was so irrelevant. But now he's great. And he's 9,700. I think he was probably like 4,500 or something like that when he's on Cleveland. I like it. I like the play. I think he'll be extremely low owned. Again, I'm worried about the matchup. But Laurie has had some randomly big games and tough matchups. So I don't hate it, man. I don't hate it. B-Dub said, I wouldn't focus on game stacking, just attack players in good spots and mix in some low-owned guys. Yeah, exactly. Like, I feel like an idiot when I say it like that, because it's just like, I'm not doing anything too crazy, like, just trying to attack the players in good spots. But it's so much easier said than done. Like, I just remember how frustrated I was when I first started, where I just, there's not a cheat code, you just got to try to take some shots, take some risk. And for me, as long as I'm trying to have fun and not trying to win, it sounds so corny, that helps me do better. If I'm focusing on winning, I lose. It's just the way it works. Jimmy Hayes says, yep. Kanger said, Mitchell will be lower owned. Everyone can pay up for Luka with the value we have. Yeah, I agree. I'm fairly optimistic he will be lower owned, but I hesitate to try to predict what the projections will be. Donovan's like 8% owned. Guys, you guys are really trying to get me on this Mitchell hype train. If he fails tonight, everyone's going to be like, oh, Bob, you suck so bad. But I'm probably going to do it still. Probably like 20, 25%. Agreed. Grayson's been crushing. Mobley and Allen won't let marketing go too crazy. And then there's Love too. Yeah, that's my thoughts too, Vic, as of right now. But you never know. Bobby said, I noticed your leverage plays on the cheat sheet are primarily ones you are doubling the field on. Would you consider including plays you are well under the field also for leverage? Yeah, I used to do that. Like, I used to add like fades on the leverage sheet, but they never work out. And so I just stopped doing it. It's just the way it happened. For me also, I've stopped like completely fading players more often than not. I've done it maybe like 3 times this season. It has worked out 2 out of 3 times. And I usually let the pre-lock show know, like, hey, I don't think you guys need to do it, but I'm frustrated with this guy, so I'm just taking him out of my player pool. I only do that like once or twice a season. It's not a smart way of playing, but when I feel strongly about it, I'll do it. Typically for me, my fades are really just kind of like lowering my forced exposure. So like if I'm getting 80% of someone, let's say they're projected to be like 20% owned, I'll put like a 40% exposure maximum on them. So technically I can still have some leverage, but it's not going to ruin my night because I personally don't feel good about them. I've started to kind of lean away to full fading, guys. Vic said, I'm playing them nice. Let's do it. Jimmy Hayes, I think I'm finally going to fade Luka. Oh God. I personally don't like Luka tonight. My opinions on it. I want to see how things go. Thomas said, I think it will be Mitchell. Yeah, I agree. So guys, yeah, that's pretty much how I'm treating the Jazz tonight. Pretty much how I'm treating that game. Next up, we have the Suns. The Suns are another team with a lot of injuries. Chris Paul is out. That's pretty massive already. But then we have DeAndre Ayton listed as questionable. Shamit's questionable. Craig is questionable. All guys who've seen solid minutes. Ayton has a large usage rate. Shamit has been stepping up a ton. He's someone that we will want to have exposure to if Paul ends up being out. Craig, yeah. He's questionable. We'll see if he plays. He does play solid minutes, so still viable. Campaign's out. Devin Booker's out. Cam Johnson's out. The Suns are hurting. Like, literally everyone's hurt on this team. I mean, I think the obvious play is Dwayne Washington. He had a solid time out on Sunday. If with Paul out, and especially if Shamit's out, that's a nice boost to Dwayne Washington's minutes floor, and his usage rate is already sky high. So fantastic for him. If Ayton is out, I hate playing the Suns centers. So I'll probably still lean towards the Miami Heat center, but I'll still allow some exposure to like Biyombo and even Landale. Ugh. I'll probably have some exposure, but I'm not going to allow them to be a core player or anything like that for me. I'm sick of that situation. Vic said Washington is a lock for me. If he starts, even better. Yeah, like there's no reason to try and avoid Dwayne Washington tonight. It just doesn't make sense. Bobby said, I think we should combine the Suns and Miami to come up with a whole team. That is freaking brilliant. That is probably the smartest thing I've heard, because they're all out. And like, we're playing all these gross names when we could probably makeshift a pretty solid team with the Suns and Heat. With that being said, too, like Mikal Bridges could go a little overlooked here. Potentially. I haven't heard a ton about him. It's still early, though, so people will probably start touting him up a good bit here later. But if no one's on Mikal Bridges, I like the spot for him. The Golden State Warriors are a better defensive team at home, but Mikal Bridges could potentially be the only guy on this team who starts typically. So I think he could be viable. I think we can take shots on Lee. We can also consider, like I said, Shamit if he does play. So definitely something to look at. Jamie Dean said the Miami Suns has a nice ring to it. That's actually another pretty good name. That's kind of wild. You guys should get into marketing. Next up, we have the Warriors. Steph Curry. He's questionable. He might play tonight. It's been a while. It's been a long while. Klay Thompson is probable. Andre Iguodala is probable for some reason. Kuminga's still out, Wiseman's still out, and JaMychal Green is still out. So with that being said, the Warriors aren't looking super interesting tonight. The matchup, they're facing a lot of bums. So the spread is pretty close. Well, no, the spread's pretty wide. It looks like the Warriors are going to destroy. There's 11.5 point spread. I think this is a team I'm probably not going to have a lot of exposure to, especially if Steph plays. Jordan Poole at 8,500 is way too expensive unless there's really a blowout and they just give Jordan Poole way more run than he should have. I think Draymond Green is probably the guy that's on my radar the most in this game, with Kuminga, Wiseman, Green out, JaMychal Green out. He has a slightly higher minutes floor. 6,500 isn't a crazy price tag. The matchup against the Suns could be softer if Ayton's out. So I think Draymond Green's on my radar, but still not like one of my favorite plays or anything like that. And then I never chase the blowout narrative, but if you guys feel like there will be a blowout tonight and it's going to be pretty bad, like halfway through the third quarter, you start seeing some reserves, then you could consider a guy like Moses Moody at 3,200. Not an awful play. Next up, we have the Orlando Magic. Kanger said Phoenix Heat isn't too bad either. I mean, Phoenix is super hot, so that actually fits the vibe. You guys are wild. Thomas said Luka might have like a TCU performance tonight. That game was awful. I couldn't even watch it. It was so bad. Bobby said I had Green targeted before you said it. Damn, feel like I'm getting better. Yeah, like I love like when we all can like naturally like realize like, oh, this is a sharp play. This is a guy who could be a little bit overlooked. It's not always going to be it's not always going to pan out, but at least like you're seeing the sharper plays. That's nice. It's always good. Jamie said blowout potential. Wiggins coming back from an injury, plus Steve Kerr is a recipe for disaster. Yeah, it's supposed to happen. But if Draymond Green has extremely low ownership, I'll take a shot. Vic David said Suns and Heat should just swap names. Y'all are wild. Hey, Scott Newman's in here. He said, what is going on? It's wild in here, man. It's wild. We're already overtime. You know, we're just vibing. We're just vibing. All right. Next up, guys, we have the Orlando Magic. And you guys know I hate playing the Magic just in general. And for me, uh, it's even worse when they're starting to get healthier. Bol was not on the injury report, so it looks like he will play today. Okiki is out. Jonathan Isaac is out. This front court is going to be wild. They'll have Franz Wagner, Banchero, Carter Jr., Bol returning. Mo Bamba's still on the radar somewhere. Um, I'm not looking to play the Magic tonight. It's also a back-to-back for them, so not a situation I love a ton. If you really want to force some exposure, I'm okay with Paolo Banchero here. The matchup's not insane. Ownership should stay pretty low on him. I'm okay with him. I'm okay with Paolo here. But again, back-to-back, not my favorite spot, but I'll be okay with getting some exposure naturally. On the other side of this, we have the Portland Trailblazers. Jamie said, simple. Today is Taco Tuesday. Don't bother playing Banchero. Nice. That does make it a lot easier. We'll see. We'll see what the DS gives me. I doubt I'll force it, but I'll be okay having some like natural exposure around 10 to 15%. Bobby said, agree. No Magic for me. Yeah, as of right now, I can't do it. Scott said, today is my first day playing NBA. I need all the Scott, shut up. Shut up. Scott's an NBA coach here at DFS Army, guys. For those of you that don't know, that's why I can be mean to him. He is not a rookie at all. Yeah, exactly. He's capping. He's capping. All right. For the Trailblazers, they're looking pretty healthy as well. We have Yusuf Nurkic listed as probable. Gary Payton the second listed as probable. Winslow's out. Nasir Little's out. Not a team that I love today. The Magic, they have allowed the second most made 3 points per game. So that's an interesting statistic. That does make a guy like Damian Lillard look a little bit more interesting. Simon's a little bit more interesting. Grant, he's there too. For me, it's Damian Lillard who really stands out the most. You guys know I'm a sucker. I always play Damian Lillard. He's almost always low owned. The matchup's always fantastic. Everyone's always afraid of the blowout. Damian Lillard more than likely will be a guy for me tonight, per usual. Vic said no LeBron on Taco Tuesdays. Bobby's on Lillard too. Nice. Scott said only new guys get limited on FanDuel. Of course. JJ said Scott's been trolling. Scott is the ultimate troll. He's fantastic at it. But that's why he's great. Like, he's a fantastic goat on FanDuel and DraftKings, you know? Simons looks okay. Yeah, like, he looks interesting. His price tag has finally come down back to earth, like around 6,500. Whereas before, people were paying like 7, 8K for him, which was way too much with Damian Lillard healthy. I'm willing to have exposure to Simons. Lillard's my main guy, but Simons is also viable on this slate. Jamie said, I only mentioned that because Banchero has been Taco Tuesday for a couple of times and known to screw over the community when that happens. Huh, interesting. I haven't seen that trend personally, but I haven't looked for it. So that's definitely interesting. Yeah, exactly. I love having exposure to the last games because people just tend to overlook it, focusing on like the early news we get. Jamie said, I am in a tough cookie between Lillard, Butler, or Leonard. Whew, Lillard and Leonard sound way too similar. But yeah, that is the tough choice on this slate. I think Butler and Leonard will be like your safer cash plays with still a ton of upside. And so I'm not trying to avoid either of them on this slate. Lillard is kind of like your sneaky high upside play. So take that as you will. I'm not really going to point you in one direction because I like all three, honestly. Yeah, agreed. Good price on them. Nice. All right, so yeah, that's how I'm treating this team. Moving on. We have the Dallas Mavericks against the Clippers. For the Mavericks, we have Luka Doncic listed as questionable. Let me refresh, make sure that's still completely updated. Okay, yeah, he's still listed as questionable. Dorian Finney-Smith, Mr. DFS, is out. I feel like I can't give Dorian Finney-Smith the nickname of Mr. DFS because he's very rarely a good DFS play. But whatever. Josh Green is out. Maxi Kleba is out. weird situation where Jaden Hardy played close to 30 minutes, 27 minutes to be exact, in the last game Doncic was out for. Dinwiddie led the team in assists. And the usage rate, the guys who led it was, of course, Dinwiddie with like 29%, Hardaway with 26.3%, and Wood at 25%. Once again, this is a big questionable tag. If Doncic is out, that will greatly shift the slate. Christian Wood would be probably one of my favorite center/power forward plays. Tim Hardaway Jr. would be in a nice spot. The Clippers are a tough team defensively, but with Paul George out, it's a slightly easier matchup. Kawhi Leonard is still a great defender, but not as tough as it would be if Paul George was playing. So I'm open to playing the Mavericks here. I like them a lot more if Doncic is out. If Doncic is in, he's still viable on this slate. I'm not going to make a call yet on how much exposure I'll have. It will really just depend on how much I get in the domination station and also where his ownership lies. I think, like everyone's expecting, I think the questionable tag is what throws me off. I think that could scare ownership off of him. And so that's why I'm hesitating a little bit. If he's low owned, then of course I'll have some shots and take some exposure. If everyone thinks the sneaky thing to do is to get off of Doncic. So that's why I'm not making a call there yet. I'm just trying to consider it. Vic said, I realize you need at least one piece in the late game to take down a GPP or even a single entry. That's not always the case. I don't always try to force exposure to the last game. One of my biggest wins were actually without any exposure to the last game. And I was a nervous wreck hoping RJ Barrett didn't make one more point. And the game went into overtime. And for some reason, RJ Barrett wasn't out there. And he shot a 3 right there at the end of the game. And I was super nervous and thankful he missed. But I'm just telling that story just because, late game exposure isn't something you always have to have. It's just typically a little bit overlooked. Scott said, easy game play, the guys who score the most. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Vic said, man has upside. Yeah, on the Clippers, I don't disagree. JJ said, that is hard to do. A lot of the top boom spots last night had 20-ish. All right. Finney Smith needs a new career. You're not wrong, man. Vic likes Zubac. Jamie said, do you guys think Doncic is going to end up spending his whole career on the Mavs? I feel like he is wasting his talent there. I do too, man. I feel like he's wasting it. But, there's always a chance like some miracle could happen and they're able to find another true stud to play with them. If that does happen, then maybe he would have a chance. He's so talented. I hope he does. I hope he doesn't end up like Harden, like really good for a few years, can't make it to a championship, and then kind of loses his talent and just starts joining a lot of random teams hoping to get it. Vic said, look, will end up in LA or Miami. CU was nervous. I'm saying when I look, it happens naturally to pivot. Interesting. Yeah, Bobby, that's a really good example. He's like Trout on the Angels. That's so true. All right, guys. So again, I don't want to overlook Doncic. The questionable tag, I think, will potentially scare some people off of him. So let's just see where ownership falls before we make any rash decisions. Let's just breathe a little bit and go from there. All right, next up, we have another interesting situation for the Clippers. It is wild. Paul George is out. Luke Kennard is out. Brandon Boston's out. But what's even crazier is the rotations they've been utilizing here lately. On Sunday, Reggie Jackson, their starting point guard, typically, only played 7 minutes. And then Terrence Mann and Norman Powell saw an increase in minutes, whereas Jackson just didn't come back on the court. The coach for the Clippers said that Jackson's not going to always have that role, and that he did like what he saw from Mann and Powell playing with the starters. So we don't really know how the rotation is going to pan out here. I'm interested in seeing if everyone moves towards Terrence Mann and what his ownership looks like, because you would assume they played better. He will see an increase in minutes. Yeah, that was a smart call. I didn't play on Sunday. I just watched. But Jackson didn't start either, which made him an easy fade. Yeah, I think that's the case again. As long as Jackson doesn't start, we can fade him pretty easily. what worries me is that if they do move him back into the starting lineup, like, how do we respond to that? We might not even know before lock. I don't know. Timothy thinks Jackson will be needed tonight. I think for me, if he starts, he's viable. If he doesn't start, I'm not going to play him. Kawhi Leonard with Paul George out at 8,700 is a guy that I'm going to have exposure to. It just makes too much sense for me to try and force the fade. Now, if he's like 80% owned, then maybe, but that's just simply not going to happen. So definitely a guy I'm going to have plenty of exposure to. We'll see once we get ownership if he's going to be like a core play or a leverage play from that. All right. So guys, yeah, that's pretty much all of this insane, crazy slate. There's a lot of injury news, a lot of questionable tags, a lot of things we need to make sure we're paying attention to. And just like last night, very possible that we're going to need to late swap again. So definitely don't shut down everything because you got to stay in tune to what's going on. Bobby said Luke will be playing for the new Arizona 8. You guys are cracking me up. All right, guys. Hey, well, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate the support and the interaction. You guys make this so much easier by just kind of keeping the chats going. So again, thank you for the support and look forward to seeing you guys on the pre-lock show later today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. Peace out. Have a good one, guys.